Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, Jesse, I didn't realize both the time and that I needed to log us in. Hello.
Hi. Your hair seems to have a mind of its own.
It always does.
Me too.
Jesse, you want me to admit all these folks? Are you seeing that? Oh no, I'm only seeing that. Got it.
I'm only seeing that. You got to make me co-host if you like me to.
Got it. No, I was able to.
Can you make me co-host though?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now. Sorry, everyone, we're doing things a little differently this week with the technology, so apologies. We're just getting ourselves a little settled. Still Zoom, but not the typical way.
So I don't see an option to stream it. I only see recording is happening now. So we'll just post the video after the meeting.
Okay. Two more people coming in. Great. Oh, here we have two more people. Here and then Betty and Maria. Oh, that's great. Okay. Carrie, are you with us?
I'm here.
Great.
So please.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
I don't have permission. Yes.
You don't have permission.
Here's Bert, 8.
Jesse, I just muted you if you can hear me. 8, but the first item we're not voting on, so maybe we'll be in a better place as the evening goes on, because we thank you all for accommodating the moved schedule. We know that the other land use is meeting right now, and some people will hope to join after that meeting is over.
So, sorry, guys. If you were needing me for a second, I was dealing with a technology issue with the other committee that's meeting tonight.
No problem. I just muted you because that's all I'd said.
Okay.
So we're not quite at quorum, but I think we could get started. Are you any concerns with doing that, Jesse?
No. I mean, this is a presentation where I think we're having an ongoing conversation. I don't know. And so we're fine with it, fine to start. I'm sure we'll grab a few more members as they come in.
Great. Carrie, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, sorry, that's my job. Yes, one sec. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Keenan. Jessica Chait and I are the co-chairs of this Chelsea Land Use Committee, which usually meets monthly, and this is our December meeting. As per the city's order, we are still meeting remotely. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on YouTube later. The agenda for tonight is public and can be viewed on Community Board 4 website. We encourage you to sign up for eBlast to get the agenda. If this is your first time at a Community Board 4 meeting, there are 3 things to know about the process. After each presentation, first, the committee will ask questions to the presenter, then members of the public or attendees can ask questions and make comments. Subsequently, the discussion goes back to the committee. On some agenda items, committee members may next vote to make a recommendation, which usually results in a letter for the full board to vote on. If you'd like to comment or ask a question after a presentation and after the committee has spoken, I guess tonight, since things are a little different, you will just press your raised hand button and we will call on you to either unmute or we will unmute you. If you have any questions regarding what I just shared, please raise your hand now. Not seeing any. Maybe the committee members who are here can take a quick moment to introduce themselves. Jessica?
Great, I'll start. I'm Jessica Chait. I'm the co-chair of Chelsea Land Use and live on West 15th Street. Used to live on 20th Street, which we're going to be talking a lot about today. Next on my screen is Pamela, so we'll go to you.
Okay, I'm Pamela Wolf. I'm a public member of this committee and public member of CB4 for many years. I am searching for the raised hand function and I don't find it anymore. Can somebody tell me where to find a raised hand function?
Reflections.
You go to reactions. The
I
reactions
went to
button?
reactions and it's not giving me a raised hand option.
So
this may is anyone else having the same issue?
No, I see mine.
Okay, it's not there.
So
always have your
okay.
human hand.
Okay, found it. Thank you.
There, yeah. Renal,
Thank you.
it's actually below, it's like a bar below the emojis. If you click on reactions.
Yeah, I did that and I found it. Thank you.
Okay,
It
great. I just want to make sure everyone's able to find that. Anyone else having an issue? Okay, great. So Pamela, you want to pass the potato?
Sure. Who's right after me besides Jessica? I see Renal.
Sure. Hi, I'm Renal Vikram. I'm a member of CB4 and also a member of the Chelsea Land Use Committee and the WPE Committee.
David?
Pass it.
I'm Dave Holoka. I live on 19th Street. I'm also on the Waterfront Parks and Environment Committee.
Bert?
Hey everyone, I'm Bert Lazarin. I've been a member of the community board for a number of years, and I'm also co-chair of the Business License and Permits Committee and former chair of the board.
Thanks, Bert. Betty?
Hi, Betty McIntosh. I live at 28th Street in Penn South, member of this committee and the Housing Committee.
And Viren?
My name is Viren Brahmas. I'm a member of the Chelsea Land Use Committee, live in Chelsea, also on Transportation Committee.
I see we have 2 other Community Board 4 members. Alan, you want to say hello?
Sure, hi. Alan Oster. I co-chair the Arts, Culture, Education, and Street Life Committee, and also on Transportation. And I was a little surprised to wind up on the box here. somehow. But
It's a different kind of Zoom tonight. Different kind of Zoom.
Different. Oh, that's good. It's always nice to have a different Zoom now and then. So pleasure to see you, and looking forward to an interesting conversation on the building. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And Maria?
Last but not least, Maria Ortiz, co-chair of Housing, Health, and Human Services. I also serve on the ACES committee. And Alan, I was surprised too to be brought into this part. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
So thanks everyone. Passing it back to me. We have 2 items on the agenda. Jessica's going to lead the first one, which is a presentation by ESD regarding the draft RFP for Bayview in Special West Chelsea District.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Before we welcome our presenters, I want to, I know this is not a new topic and something we've already begun discussing in more recent history, but just want to, make sure everyone feels comfortable with all of the history and what we're discussing today. So for way of background, and hopefully you read the letters in the Dropbox, but CB4 has long been on the record, and in particular, you can see in the 2014 letter in the Dropbox, that Bayview is is a historic resource that must be preserved. It was designed by the same architects of the Empire State Building and housed the Siemens YMCA from 1931 to 1966. The building is both historically and architecturally significant and was deemed state and national register eligible in 2005 in the environmental impact statement for the West Chelsea Special District rezoning. The board has requested, an RFP has previously been issued. Many of you were deeply involved in that process, we know, and we had long encouraged that ESD only entertain proposals from respondents, which include preservation and restoration of the brick and masonry facade, including the multiple terracotta plaques. There'll be more on the tiles and plaques shortly. The installation of historically appropriate windows and doors, the restoration of building entry sconces, and that additions, if sought, are minimal and consistent with the building character, and that preservation and reuse of stained glass windows, a mural and commemorative plaque located within the chapel on the 2nd floor of the building be considered. Again, there was an RFP, the building, after being the Siemens YMCA, served as a women's prison until Hurricane Sandy. Some of us have been in the building over the last 10 years, including just recently this week, and could see the significant damage caused by Sandy, as well as the high water marks in the basement, which really were, over 7 feet high of water, really, really significant to see. There was since then, as I mentioned, another RFP, which led to the consideration or the selection of Novo to host a women's organization there. We know for various reasons that proposal did not come to light. The proposal and the project has really continued to sit vacant. There is a 24-hour security guard there, but not much has happened in the space since that time. And as many of you have been following, the governor announced Bayview as to be included in Penn Station redevelopment as part of that process. Penn Station redevelopment is not going forward at this time. However, ESD has continued and committed to moving forward this part of the project with a commitment of affordable housing as a potential solution or potential use or the use of the building. This has been very much in line with our very own affordable housing plan. Many of you know it came before this committee. We included Bayview as an affordable housing site in the affordable housing plan. We're excited that there's real interest and commitment to doing that. And so today we're going to hear a presentation from ESD that really do hopefully take us through the process as they are considering it. You should know this is also going to housing tomorrow night, and that's in part why Maria is here today, so that we can be sure that we're getting not consistent, but we're making sure that as many of us are following this issue from both sides can hear the feedback from the community and from this committee. but we are, have the opportunity to try to tackle two things at once here. And one is the issue of preservation and restoration of the building. And the other being to address the affordable housing crisis that we have here in the city by making more housing available through this facility. We were able to visit the site on Monday, and Pamela, Dave, Carrie, Jesse, and myself and Joe were there. I don't know if I'm missing anyone, as well as representatives from, well, actually many representatives from many groups who have a vested interest in the building. I know there were some serious concerns about the issues of preservation around the tiles and the way that the tiles have been handled. Some of you will all know that tiles had fallen or were otherwise taken down off the building. It was claimed that they presented a security hazard. And I know there's still significant concern about, one, what to do with the elements that have been removed, two, how to ensure that any remaining items, or how to ensure that the replication of those elements is done in an appropriate manner and a timely manner, and also to make sure that any of the current elements that are still up there are maintained. So that is one whole piece, and we'll get the committee's feedback on that and the community's feedback as well on that. But I also want to acknowledge that the use of this space and a use as an affordable housing location is something that will also include a community center and a gym that we expect to be open to the public, is something that we want to get this committee's feedback on as well. So this is, both a preservation and a use discussion. The plan, just very quickly, and then ESD, I'm sorry, I'll turn it over to you, but just quickly, the plan is, this is our December meeting, of course. We're not taking a vote on this today. This is just an opportunity to collect your feedback and have ESD also, for us to all hear of ESD's specific plans, for us to share our hopes and concerns for the building and the plan specifically. HHHS, as I mentioned, will be meeting tomorrow. We will then have a public hearing on this matter at the January full board meeting. So an opportunity again to gain even further feedback from the community on this. And then we will bring this back to this committee and HHHS in January with the goal of bringing that feedback and concretizing that feedback in the form of a letter, which would go to ESD with our formal recommendations. That said, we're again delighted that ESD is here and has been really coming to the table, wanting to listen, and has been responsive, at least initially, to the concerns that we're raising, and has really approached us with an open mind. And so, we expect that this process hopefully will continue to be one of sharing and building towards something that can accommodate the needs of the community and our interests around preservation and affordable housing, while also being something that the state can execute on. So with that, I'm going to introduce Angel Santana, who we met with a couple of weeks ago as coordinated by Senator Brad Hoylman. And it looks like Gabriella Green is also joining us from ESD. Angel, I'll turn it over to you if there's anyone else you want to introduce. I don't know if anyone else, it's also, sorry, just a word, I know we acknowledged it, we're using a different Zoom function or platform tonight. So we have committee members and attendees and our guests all in the mix. Usually we keep them in a sort of waiting room. So we have more faces on the screen than usual. And for that reason, it'll be really important we introduce ourselves and use the raise hand function so that we can make sure we are getting to the committee first, speakers, and then the community at large. Okay, with that, Angel, I'll turn it over to you to introduce if there's anyone else on your team, and I think you'll be able to share the screen as well for your presentation.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. I just wanted to quickly just thank the community board for allowing us to present tonight at your committee meeting. There's a lot of you who were at our recent tour, as Jessica mentioned earlier this week, and I'm glad to see some familiar faces from that tour is here present tonight. As Jessica mentioned, ESD has committed supportive housing for this site as part of a pen discussion with the community board. And although that's moving forward in its own separate track, we do want to, move this forward as well. So I just wanted to, we wanted to present on a draft overview of the project. essentially discuss some of our draft development objectives and give a little bit of an overview on ESD's overall process. Also, I just wanted to state that, we're really here because we want to have that feedback and get that community feedback from you all. So, hopefully this is an open, discussion on that feedback. And I do want to introduce Gabriella Green, who's our VP for real estate at ESD, who will be presenting on this project. I'll definitely pull up. I think I have the share function, ability here. So I'll pull up our presentation and Gabriella will get started.
Okay, excuse me. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Gabriella Green, as Angel said, VP for Planning and Real Estate at ESD, and I'm project manager on the Bayview project so far, taking it over from many hands that have touched it before, and I know you all have a lot of background with the site. So we touch on that a little bit in the presentation, but I won't belabor it because I know many of you have lived it very intimately through its various iterations. So with that, I think we can pull it up and start. Okay, perfect. All right, we're here to give a draft RFP overview. And next slide, please. Our agenda, high level, and then certainly leaving time for a robust discussion. I'll go into a little detail about the site, some project history, lessons learned, key takeaways from that history, what our current draft development objectives are for the RFP, and then some high-level overview of the ESD process, and then our timeline and next steps for this site. Next slide, please. So as you all likely know, the project in question is located at 550 West 20th Street and 11th Avenue on the corner. It's about 4/10 of an acre of the site. It's two adjoining building sections that form the Bayview Correctional Facility. It's an 8-story west section facing the river, and then further in towards the mid-block is the 6-story east section. Altogether, the building totals over 100,000 gross square feet of floor area. And this photograph here is sort of a bird's eye view looking north and west. And you can see the rooftop exercise facility on the top of the building there with that sort of caged in area. And then to the right is the lower story, 6-story east section. Next slide, please. Just to dig into the zoning a little bit here, it's located in the Special West Chelsea zoning district, majority in sub-area D, and we've had preliminary discussions with Department of City Planning that even though there's a small portion in sub-area E, it is sub-area D that will govern the zoning for the site. And because it is in this special district, there is an opportunity for a site to reach up to 7.5 FAR, purchasing Highline transfer corridor development rights. We are not proposing to do that kind of purchase, but what we would propose is allowing that floor area up the FAR up to 7.5, as long as it meets the development objectives, as long as any use proposed is for the betterment and the furtherment of our development objectives. Next slide, please. So as we all were aware, the site is eligible for listing on the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places, and therefore will require consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office, which we call SHPO, and we would ensure that any adverse impacts are avoided or mitigated to the fullest extent practicable. And so this level of protection is the same whether it is eligible or listed. So we are following that same level of protection and coordination with SHPO. A future designated developer will be responsible for all the required mitigation in consultation with ESD and under the guidance of SHPO. Currently, there were identified unsafe conditions at the site due to the masonry deteriorating on the facade and pieces actually falling off. So under an emergency contract, the Office of General Services, OGS, has contracted to stabilize the facade. During that process, the existing conditions of the historic features have been documented and samples have been preserved for future restoration. They've also done laser scanning to ensure that they have highly accurate detailed confirmation of what those elements look like for future restoration. And this is the best practice as required by SHPO. So they've been working on that in consultation with SHPO. Another site feature, not as interesting or as exciting, is that it is within the boundaries of a former manufactured gas plant site, and it's subject to an order on consent with the Department of Environmental Conservation. All that means is that we have to also coordinate with DEC with any redevelopment here to ensure that it is done in accordance with that order and done to the standards required for safe environmental redevelopment. And additionally, as Jessica mentioned, with the flooding of Hurricane Sandy, the site is located in the high-risk AE flood zone, and therefore there are additional regulations through FEMA and the City of New York's flood resilience zoning text that need to be adhered to in any redevelopment of the project. Next slide, please. So this is that brief history I said I was going to touch upon. As you all may recall, in 2014, there was an RFP issued in May, and in the fall of that year, a proposal was selected from the Novo organization to do a women's facility. And then there were subsequently about 5 years of work put into that project. And then ultimately they withdrew their proposal and said it was not viable or feasible and no longer wished to move forward with it. So, you know, what we really want to learn from this is that we don't want to go down a path like that again. We don't want to spend 5 more years or 6 more years, as the case may be, seeking and evaluating proposals, getting our hopes up for a particular project and have it be not feasible and really waste a lot more time and let the building sit there empty and in a deteriorating and, you know, unfortunate condition. That's what we don't want to have happen. So we're trying to take away the lessons from that and craft an RFP that is meets our development goals, but is also feasible and selects the appropriate team with the capacity to carry out the project that we hope to see. Next slide, please. So how we see that is just a need to balance our project goals with those site challenges. We know that there will be costs to the historic preservation of the building. We know that there will be increased costs because of the flood protection required. And we want to see housing affordability and community facility developed here. So we're trying to ensure that we are being very rigorous in our assessment of what we see as possible and feasible here and meeting those housing and community facility goals while taking into consideration the fact that there are some kind of extraordinary costs associated with using a site like this. Next slide, please. So our draft development objectives at this point are, and this is somewhat summarized, but basically verbatim for how they will be shown in the request for proposals, is that we seek to benefit the West Chelsea neighborhood and surrounding communities, to require at least 60 supportive housing units, to provide a community facility, and to provide adaptive reuse for the historic elements of the property to the extent feasible, while incorporating sustainable and green building practices and incorporating participation from minority and women-owned business enterprises and service-disabled veteran-owned business enterprises as well. Next slide, please. This sort of cumbersome looking thing shouldn't be, so I have to work on this image because I find it not as useful to communicate what I'm trying to say. But basically what we want to say here is, this is an overview of the ESD process, the GPP process. So as you can see in column 1 is community outreach, and we've started it already, and it will be ongoing through the entire time that we are going through the RFP and GPP processes. GPP stands for General Project Plan, and that's the ESD process for taking a site from state ownership and putting it into development. So as we go through the GPP, we'll create that project plan in accordance with the selected development that comes through the RFP process. And then we will have to take it through a certain level of public hearings and public reviews. So the board will, the ESD board meets to adopt the GPP. We have public hearings, we have public comment period. We then provide any revisions to the GPP based on those comments, and then it comes back to the ESD board for an additional vote. And while that GPP process is going on, we also do a State Environmental Quality Review Act, or a SEQRA process, wherein we have a draft scope prepared, we have a scoping meeting, then we do the draft environmental review. This one assumes an EIS, which may or may not be required for this site, but this just shows the overarching type of process that may occur. And then we have the hearings in conjunction with one another for the SEQRA and the GPP. So those happen simultaneously at the ESD board. So that's generally, those are the main highlights of the GPP process. I just want to, there's a lot on this slide, but you guys will have, you have these documents and you can review them, and we can certainly get into more detail as we advance. All right, next slide, please. And I think this might be my last slide, which is just to say more simply where we are in our timeline, just focusing on the RFP process, is that we are meeting with your committee and tomorrow night's committee as well, and anticipate getting your feedback on the RFP draft development goals. We hope to issue the RFP in the first quarter of next year, get responses in the second quarter, and make a selection by the end of the year. Just as a rough timeline for what's coming in 2023. And I think with that, we can just open it up to questions.
Thank you, Gabriella. And we can, yeah, great. Before we get to questions, and just to remind everyone, we'll go committee first, and then and we do want to hear from everyone on the committee, so we are going to engage in some name calling if you don't raise your hand, and then we'll go to the community and anyone who wants to share on that. I do just want to, I had mentioned the affordable housing plan that, again, this committee approved and the board approved much earlier this year. And if you didn't look at it, it is in the Dropbox, the page specifically on Bayview. You know, that is the board's recommendation. And I don't think we're planning to deviate from that. And so I just want to, so everyone remembers what's included in there. It suggests that of the existing square footage that we propose, that remains a community service facility with pool, gym, and large industrial kitchen, and utilizing the remaining, utilizing infrastructure remaining from the building's original use. And then we've talked about making that available for public and community use beyond just who would be the residents of the building. I know there's also been some discussion from a preservation side, which is not here reflected in this document, about preserving the chapel and the tiles in the pool. And we can, as we go through, I'm sure we'll hear more about that. But the other thing that this identifies is the suggestion that the building produce 115 permanently affordable units. And as we saw on the slide, the state is committed to at least 60, but you know, the language we've used, or I believe that's what it says, but the language we've used is really to look at getting the maximum number of affordable units out of the building. And we believe that there is additional capacity to house a mentally ill homeless population needing a greater degree of social and mental health services. I know that that's already kind of been discussed with ESD in the earlier meetings, and will be discussed more at housing tomorrow night and in future conversations. But I did just want to acknowledge that that is what the board and what this committee has signed off on previously, and I suspect is going to, you know, be consistent with some of the other comments you'll hear tonight. Okay, so with that, we'll go to everyone, but Betty, you had your hand up. And I would like to ask everyone to think about those two things, both the preservation issues as well as the use issues. And I know some of us come at this with particular perspectives on, feel more passionately about one of those issues more than the other, but I think it is helpful for us to try to think about both sides of things, or, you know, both elements of the issues. So with that, Betty.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm very, very, very excited about this. And I did make a few little questions on the yellow sticky. One was the mental health component, which should be maybe in the objective section. I have a question about the need for a feasibility study because I lived through the whole women's building project, and then it came to the end that they couldn't do it, partly because there were these structures underneath, or they weren't strong enough, or whatever. And so I would like ESD to put something in this, maybe it's there and I didn't see it, a feasibility study about the physical structure of the building. And then I noticed about the increase in FAR, which was a little puzzling, which maybe you can clarify, that that the project would not take advantage of purchasing Highline Transfer Corridor development rights, but would use the 7.5 FAR. So that was kind of confusing to me. And would that imply that there would be an addition put on the building? Maybe I'll pause there for a second.
So as to the feasibility study, and through the Novo process, there were a lot of studies and documentation done, and we retain those, and we'll put those as part of the RFP as appendices, so anyone responding can see all of that analysis that has come already, and so it's not unknown or more of a black box as it was in the prior event. So, and the
FAR?
Right, the FAR, thank you, the FAR. So our proposal is that we would allow up to the permitted maximum FAR per the special zoning district, but not require the purchase of the floor area from the High Line, but rather just require that any additional floor area meet the development objectives. So, and you're right, that would mean potentially adding floors or floor area in some fashion in order to achieve the community facility or housing affordability goals, right? So it would be for the purpose of achieving our goals, not for purchase through the High Line transfer.
So do you have to have a special zoning amendment for that?
The state process through the general project plan can override the local zoning.
Okay, I think that would be very important to clarify in your literature that you're doing an override of the zoning.
We're not necessarily going to do one, but we would
considering it.
Consider it. That's right.
Considering it. And what is the implication of the fact that there was a gas plant there before? What does that mean? Is there some kind of toxic thing there?
Potentially, there are some remnants of this over 150-year-old manufactured gas plant facility within the below grade, below the basement that built right on top of when this building was built, so that if any sort of, and because that basement was flooded, the condition may need to be disrupted and dug down. And if that's the case, then protective measures need to be taken to make sure that.
Okay, that's important. I don't remember that from the women's building proposal. Two quick last ones. Is there a budget for this? And I'm guessing it's not going to go through ULURP.
It's not going to go through ULURP. It's going to go through the state plan process, the general project plan process. The budget for this is that we've been working with the state housing agency, HCR, Homes and Community Renewal, and they have agreed to provide the resources for the supportive housing. And additionally, we have, which is a big change from the prior RFP, we are not having a purchase price for the site. So the value of the site is also a resource that the state is putting in towards the development. So we don't know what the exact budget is because we don't know what the exact project is, but we do know we have those committed resources.
So it's like a leg up. You don't have to pay for the building.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But the state is sort of absorbing it or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, my pleasure.
Betty, do you have anything? I know you also are experienced on the preservation issues. Do you have any comments? Just again, would like people to kind of think of both sides there. Anything on preservation?
Well, I mean, I think you stated them. It's in the housing plan. I can picture everything: the chapel, the mural, the tiles around the pool. I mean, it's extraordinary resource that way, and I think you said it well from the plan.
Okay, thank you. And also just, I'm not as familiar with this, but apparently Gabriella did touch on it, which is HDR does seem to be coming to the table with significant resources. And not only is that seeming to be new to this iteration of the project, but when other people heard kind of the portfolio that this will sit in and the resources that are available, it felt like that it really reflected a real commitment to deliver on this, because the HDR does have a significant budget with which to work and take on this project. So not an unfunded mandate, it seems. Okay, Dave, your hand was up next.
Yeah. Gabriella, you mentioned that there could be a zoning override. Can you tell us what the current FAR is and what the actual FAR of the building is and what you anticipate might be the maximum required? Is there any limit on what you could go for?
I don't know what the current built FAR is. It's the current building floor area is about 100,000 square feet. So if you let me do a little math, I can get back to you with what the FAR is, but what we propose is not to go above what is in the maximum of 7.5 FAR of the special West Chelsea zoning district. So that would be the proposed limit.
Yeah, I think it would help to know how much bigger a building that would be. I think the current FAR is 5, so even if it's built to the max, we're talking about adding 50% more. And what the experience with Novo was that they found that for their numbers to work, they needed a lot more square footage, and they came back with a proposal that gutted the building, saved just the facades, and built sort of a glass tower within them that we weren't happy with.
Okay.
Is there going to be anything in the RFP that says you can't build above the historic corner building, but only say above the annex?
We are asking for the maximum preservation as feasible and would look for sensitive designs if they choose to add floor area. And I think it makes perfect sense that they would put it on the annex because it's a little bit less, it's not as prominent, it's not the corner, it's not where all the, the main features of the building are. I wouldn't currently word that as a requirement simply because maybe there's a design that we haven't seen yet that does something creative that, works better a different way, but it would have to be done in a way that, is sensitive to the existing building.
I think that an RFP that actually took into account capacity would be very helpful. We would know what the implications would be of having 60 versus 115 units and whether it's something you can do taking into account, the building code, accessibility requirements, all of that. It seems like that's something you'd want to have done before issuing the RFP.
We have done an analysis of what we believe is physically able to fit in the site, and our architect on our staff has looked at it. So we have one assessment, but we don't assume that we're going to be all the answers. We would like to see what other proposers put in.
Is that assessment available for us to see?
I would say that it's probably not something that we share publicly, simply because we wouldn't want that to be something that respondents took into consideration. We would want respondents to make their own responses, but suffice it to say is what we think, we think we can meet the development goals and provide at least 60 supportive housing units and a community facility, and that there are a lot of ways to sort of skin that cat.
It seems to me like, you know, this could go almost anywhere in terms of the physical building, and we're kind of flying blind here.
Well, I mean, I appreciate your comment. I think we're trying to achieve a maximum extent of historic preservation and something that is sensitively designed.
Okay, and in terms of the terracotta, why wouldn't ESD simply hire a contractor to put it back now instead of putting it on the designated developer?
The site is not in our ownership. It is in DOC's ownership, and OGS is working on behalf of DOC's. It's still in the prison, you know, agency. So just for clarification, OGS was able to do a contract on an emergency basis for the safety and security risk of pieces falling from the facade. We think a comprehensive restoration as part of a redevelopment makes more sense. It can be done as, you know, part of what the ultimate redevelopment is, so that it is done in conjunction with a final project, not in an interim fashion. And we think that will be the most sensitive and appropriate way of doing the preservation.
Can I just ask a quick question? I know I'm out of order, but can you just clarify that you are not leasing that building and the land to DOC's?
I believe it is in DOC's jurisdiction, and that OGS is working on behalf of DOC's as the contractor. But I can double check that if you think there's some reason that we have a lease.
And DOC's would be Department of Corrections, correct?
That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, if we could just, for not everyone here knows all the acronyms.
Yep, I apologize. I sometimes.
All right, Gabrielle. Thank you.
Couldn't you just reconceive the emergency work so that the endpoint isn't the removal of the terracotta, but it's removal and stabilization and reinstallation?
I would have to check with OGS on that. I do not know if they have that contracting ability.
Yeah, I'm just really concerned about passing the work on to the designated developer. You know, who knows when we're going to have a designated developer? We had one 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see this kind of kick down the road into the sweet by and by, and maybe it happens and maybe it doesn't, and maybe decades go by without the terracotta being put back. I would really push for having it done as soon as possible. You know, it's going to be at an additional remove if it's the designated developer, whereas right now we have ESD involved and SHPO, you're both state agencies. It just seems to be.
SHPO and ESD will continue to be involved once there is a designated developer and you know, ongoing beyond.
Well, as I said, it'll be at an additional remove. I'm just very uncomfortable with this and would like to see the terracotta put back as soon as possible.
Well, we'll look into that.
Thank you.
Dave, anything on the use that you'd like to reflect on?
You know, I don't know if there's anything that could be created for the arts on the first floor. The Special West Chelsea Zoning District encourage development that would include arts related uses. You know, maybe there could be a small gallery space of some kind on the first floor. Have you considered anything like that for the RFP?
That would be compatible with what, you know, a community facility use, right? So that would be a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We'll go to Bert and then Mirnal.
Well, thank you for your presentation. I have a question, and maybe you've already covered the answer or intend to bring it up tomorrow at Housing Committee. I'm not a housing person. I leave that to Maria and her committee people, but I do have a housing question. You say minimum of 60 supportive housing units.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'd like to know how you came up with 60.
Mm-hmm.
And two, what about permanently affordable housing for people of lower income but don't need supportive services?
So 60 comes from just baseline assessment of some of the existing floor area that's built out in the building and what might be able to be comfortably fit while allowing space for the community facility and other potential housing uses, such as the one that you mentioned, which is just regular affordable housing for people with lower incomes. So it was designed to, targeted to be a number that was feasible with the existing structure, works well with housing financing programs. That's generally a good size for providing supportive services, and left room for additional uses in the building. It's an analyzed number, but it's not an absolute perfect magic number, which is why it's a minimum commitment. And possibly there could be some more depending on, the ultimate design and layout.
And what about the affordable housing?
And as well, potentially.
How many units are you thinking there?
We are not putting in a specific unit count required, but additional affordable housing units could be part of proposals. Absolutely.
Why aren't you putting in a required number, a minimum?
But that's just how we have the draft development goals at this time, but we are taking your input. So it's useful to hear your comments on
I mean, I'm just thinking, if I was a developer or something, doing the RFP and it wasn't required, why would I put it in?
I think it would, probably make your proposal more competitive if you were meeting more.
Perhaps, but it's not. Right,
yeah.
Right. It's not there. And just in terms of the supportive housing, I'm not clear how supportive housing works in other sites, but who pays for the social workers and whoever else does the support?
There is a state program that is called Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, not to use another acronym, but sometimes called ESHI. And that is that is something that that the housing provider applies for and receives funding for rental subsidy in conjunction with service subsidy. So they get a amount of money per unit per year that both buys down the rent and provides money for the on-site social services. And then the social services are targeted towards the population that they are working with. So social workers and more specialized depending on the needs of the tenants.
Okay, thanks. And just as a piece of information, if I remember correctly, south of you around 17th Street, where those, I don't know what they call themselves, trapezoid shaped buildings go up. I don't know if that's correct descriptive term, but they had, and I think that was part of the gas manufacturing site at the end of the 19th century. They had major, over a year's worth of mitigation. Now 20th Street, 19th Street may only have been peripheral to where the major site was, but just be aware. When they did new construction over down south of you, they did a lot of work digging up and cleaning up.
Yes, we have the site studies and all of the kind of borings and testings and the historic structures of where they're located and as it relates to the site. I do think there are certain locations that were more intensively used than others, and we'll have to do whatever is required by the state DEC. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Before we go to Myrna, I just wanted something that came up in maybe it was while we were at the site, but in some of the other conversations is just anticipating that because of the various uses at this proposed uses that, it won't likely be one person or one group responding to the RFP, that there will likely be a consortium of groups, appropriate providers. So if it's not just people who typically develop housing, but having a nonprofit that specializes in mental health services, or maybe even, just that there will, and the developer, and that there will likely be, or hopefully a group of those with expertise in this area to ensure that we have high quality service provision and project execution happening at all levels. So just something I hadn't thought that much about before, but Bert, I think kind of goes to your question of who might be doing this work.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Myrna.
Hi, my questions are more clarifications, really. The earlier proposal that we'd seen, the plan that we had seen, with the 115 affordable housing plus the additional housing for the mentally ill, is that still on the cards? Are we going with just the minimum of the 60? And will there be a mention of housing for the mentally ill in the RFP?
We haven't currently included that in the development goals. We have the Community Board 4 housing plan and are taking it, your recommendations very seriously, and are investigating and analyzing the feasibility of the housing, the mentally ill. I have it in front of me. A mentally ill homeless population requiring a greater degree of social and mental health services than standard supportive housing. So since an earlier meeting with the community board on this, we've been looking at this in close detail and trying to see if there are appropriate resources and programs to meet that need.
So, I mean, I just have to imagine that if you're going to put both affordable housing and housing for mentally ill in the same building, that there would have to be some sort of a separation, or I don't know, infrastructure put in accordingly.
That is quite likely a possibility. Yes.
So would it make sense to put it in the RFP then, to the extent that that is something that's on the cards?
That could be included in the development objectives. It's not in the current draft, but should that be part of any proposal, it absolutely would have to meet, the requirements of the various programs. And if it does require separate building features or different, elements, then we would ensure that those were part of any proposal before we move forward.
Understood. And then the second question, I guess it's probably more for the committee, but I remember when the tiles were taken down, we were trying to get an answer on where they were stored. Did we ever get an answer on that?
The ones that were able to be salvaged are stored in the building. They are within the building.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mirnam. We'll go to Pam.
Well, first, those are not tiles. They're actually structural sections of terracotta. They're blocks, not tiles. That was something that a point I wanted to make. I'm wondering if people who have seen them up close or from the distance, if everybody has taken note of the actual historic references, the amount of symbolism on those plaques is rife. If you look closely, or not even closely, from a distance, you see the prow of a ship, an ocean liner. You see it from sea level on the plaque. Below it is an inverted triangle, which could easily be representing waves, breaking waves on the prow of the ship. You can see the stacks above the top of the ship's prow. The colors are red, white, and blue. More symbolism for you there. And when we did our tour, it suddenly dawned on me as I was photographing those two remaining examples of the plaques, the rescued ones. They are gold leafed. That material used on them is gold leaf, and it is still there after how many decades? That's a phenomenal thing, and it is a tragic loss that most of the ones that were removed were destroyed, including the fragments of the ones that we saw were smashed. I just wanted to make that point about those pieces. I'm with David as far as not wanting to see the can get kicked down the road. I would prefer that be a part of an immediate effort to restore, and that it be in terracotta and not in plastic, which there's some reference to appropriate materials would be used, but the only appropriate material in my mind is terracotta, glazed terracotta. And there are factories that produce it. It can be done. It's not an impossibility. That was one of my comments. I wanted to to ask about affordable as compared to supportive, and to also mention the fact that while we were on the tour, I asked a question about how the population within the building was divided, and we were told that the work release portion of the prison was all set aside and separate from the main body of the population, segregated in the south end of the building. So that's something that's already been contemplated, is how the building can be divided up among the various populations that live there. Lastly, I have a very naive question. I'm concerned that some developer will come and say, look, this is a wonderful thing and I'm just ready to go for it, but I need to get some market rate housing in here just to be able to support this project. Otherwise, I can't do it. Would that be a developer that you would say, sorry, no, thank you, we're not considering that at all? Or is there a crack in the door that might allow that? Thank you.
Sure, thank you for your comments. Was there more? The last one was the question, right? There wasn't, I don't want to
miss. It was. Okay. Yes, it was.
So the way this is written currently does not eliminate the possibility for market rate uses if they support the development goals. We want to preserve as much of the building as possible. We want to make a community facility that is open and accessible to the community. We want to have those building features, internal and external, restored. We want to provide housing for people who require supportive services, possibly also housing for people of low or moderate income. So those are a lot of goals. We hope to achieve all of them. We're doing what we can in terms of providing massive state resources in the form of a free parcel and a access to housing programs. Nonetheless, if there isn't a community facility funding source specifically identified, I think the value of the site going towards that goes a long way. But as we've already kind of covered, there's historic preservation and there's the flood protection and there's the environmental remediation required. If we want to achieve all of those goals and a proposal comes back and says, here are all of your goals being met, however, it requires 50 units of market rate housing, I'm making up a number, don't quote me on this. Would we want to leave open the possibility of considering that? I recommend yes. I mean, you all are going to talk amongst yourselves and give us your recommendations, and that's what we're here to hear. But I think what we would like to put on the table is we have a wealth of goals here, and the state is contributing a lot. And we want to see if we can achieve as many or all of the goals.
So we should back off and be grateful. Is that what you're saying?
Not at all. I'm just saying I would like to see this happen. I would like to see all of these amazing suggestions met. I mean, I think you all are obviously very thoughtful and very committed, and we really appreciate that. I certainly do. I'm hopeful we don't go down we meet those goals and we see it come to fruition.
Thank you.
Carrie.
Thanks. I just want to reiterate what Betty said, that I'm really happy to see this moving forward and appreciate your presentation and, access to the building and everything, and your partnership. I have some questions, and I might be a little out of order by, asking for some specific things, but everyone will keep me in check. The current FAR of the annex this is not my expertise either, so if I get it all wrong, Betty will tell me, but is in sub area E right now. The annex is in sub area E.
Yeah, not entirely, a portion, I believe.
Okay. And that FAR for sub area E is?
I don't have that information in front of me.
It's less than 5, right? Betty, do you know? I think no.
Betty, you're muted. Sorry.
So I guess my question is, if sub area E is sort of grandfathered into sub area D and then allowed a 7.5 FAR, then that annex could be a giant tower. Is that right?
It would, because it is such a relatively small portion of the site, the analysis is that it is governed by the other sub area. And that if you permit the additional floor area up to the 7.5, which is the maximum under that sub area, there could be additional floors provided on site somewhere. Yes, I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know that it's necessarily I wouldn't necessarily say gigantic tower. I think there could be floors added in a way that is of a architecturally sensitive design.
Okay. I feel like personally, if we are going to potentially allow for, you know, such an increase in FAR, then we should be getting the 115 supportive housing units that our, you know, very well thought out and planned housing committee presented to the city and is still presenting to the city, because their math says that that's feasible. So, you know, to somebody's point of we should be grateful, I really think that we should be asking specifically for more supportive housing in that, you know, if we're going to increase the FAR.
Okay, understood.
So the interior of the V or the C of the building has windows. So I don't know how you build over the atrium, let's call it. I'm not sure that's the right term, but you know, there's sort of the middle where the pool is and the gym is, the courtyard. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like, I'm not an architect, but it doesn't seem like you can actually fill that space with a building. So, because you would be blocking the interior windows. So I don't know how there is anything other than the annex that you can build up. So I just want to, you know, for anyone who hasn't seen it, because it's like a building this way and then a building that way, on either interior wall are windows that are pretty far from each other. So it gives a lot of light and air and, you know, makes it a lot more interesting for a housing opportunity, as well as maintaining the historic, you know, the preserving the historic building. To build above the existing historic building seems really difficult. So I'm trying to put this all in my head, like, where can this extra space go? So I would like to ask that you increase the number of supportive housing units in your RFP if you want to ask for 7.5 FAR. And then secondly, it seems a little vague, provide opportunity for community use. I'm not sure what that means. And I think, you know, I'd like that to be more specific to the pool, the gym, and the kitchen. And I know we discussed on our tour that maybe the kitchen isn't in the same spot that the kitchen is in now, which is fine to consider, you know, that it be moved if that's appropriate. But I think that it would be great to be more specific about what the actual community use is, because that could mean a conference room that's available to the public. You know, I know that's not your intention, but it could mean that. And I would like to be a little more straightforward with the preservation piece as well, and remove, to the extent feasible, when it comes to the pool tiles, to the terracotta tiles, and to the stained glass windows and the other preservation elements that we've already called out. We can also be more specific with what they are and give you the list of what we think must be preserved. It's not to the best extent possible.
Yeah, that's good.
So those would be my three big things.
Thank you.
Does that sound good?
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Viren?
Yeah, I think a lot has been said. So I'm going to second what David and Pamela and Carrie and everybody else have said. My couple of questions that the suggestions that I would make is, we know the math, we know what we can build. Why not just give us the math right upfront and tell us that 7.5, this is the maximum we can build, and why not sort of give us a distribution as to what 60 units of supportive housing will translate into in terms of square feet, so we understand what is going to happen with the rest of the square feet. And we also understand the extent of the addition and how tall or short it might turn out to be. I think that would be one good thing to do. I think if you can do that before tomorrow's meeting, I think that meeting will go much more smoothly. The second thing I would suggest is similarly, in terms of distribution, supportive housing, these many units. Housing for the mentally ill, these many units. Potentially housing for low income families should be probably included, and then suggest that instead of percentage, just tell us the sort of number of units that you might entertain. And last but not the least, I think a suggestion that Mrinal was making was actually to include that in the sort of draft RFP outline to incentivize developers and not just simply leave it to them to sort of come up with ideas, but suggest that this might buy them some brownie points towards, getting this, commission awarded to them. And similarly, I think what I would also suggest is that if you want to entertain market rate component, put a cap on it, because otherwise you will leave the door not just a crack open, but wide open, and they will rush in. This is Chelsea. It's on the riverfront, and it's right across from one of the most expensive real estate building that exists on that block. So I think we should be extremely sort of careful about how we structure this RFP so the proposals that come in actually are already streamlined and we don't have to go back and forth. That would be my suggestion. And the last but not the least, even for community facility component, it would definitely be good to define what the target audience is going to be. So in other words, why not clearly state that this percentage of the community facility would target NYCHA residents or the lower income high school population, for example, with Twitter, Facebook, and Google being in the neighborhood. Something that is majorly sort of missing is technology-based community sort of service for young adults. And that I would define as much as possible, so we at least kind of solicit that sort of responses. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Viren. We'll have a chance to go to the community. I also want to introduce Natalie, who joined us on the tour, but just for my own, which will include Alan from the community. I just want to say from my perspective, thanks everyone on the committee for being so generative with your ideas and thinking. Obviously you spent a lot of time thinking about this building and the opportunity and the concerns. As I've learned more about the building itself, and we literally were standing, Pamela was showing us the boiler, asking questions about the boiler and the inner workings and the waste pipes. And, it seems really good bones to this building, but it is a very complicated structure. There's a lot, for all the reasons they just mentioned. I think I would just ask, I like where Viren left off with, let's try to be as defined as possible. I think, the last proposal, the last round came in with a lot of exciting, new, fresh ideas. I think we don't necessarily need to go in that direction. We have an opportunity to execute in providing affordable housing in a community center in our community. We can do this. And I just worry that if we go too broad, if we think about too much development, too much of anything, it's going to be one too many things that this project needs to try to juggle. And I think the simpler we can keep this, and as key to the stated goals when this project was announced, which is around affordable and now supportive housing. And let's just try to keep focused on that. And the more we can do that, I think the more likely we will be to actually successfully execute this project. So now we'll go to the community. And again, just a reminder that we'll also have a public hearing about this. So if there are more people we want to bring into this.
Alan's hand is up.
Yep, no, I know. Just letting people know that that's going to be available. Alan.
Thank you. And I'll just repeat what folks have said. It's great to see something happening with this building. But a quick follow-up, again, I agree with Varen in terms of being specific in terms of the community use. Keep in mind, we have a, well, Chelsea Piers is right across the street. A large part of this community goes to Chelsea Piers, and I don't see them going into this building for athletic activities. A lot of these buildings have their own gyms and pools and everything else. And, you know, as it has been stated, it's an upscale neighborhood that you're going to be developing in. And we also have Chelsea Rec Center, which offers a whole slew of community activities for young folks, for old folks. So it might be wise to kind of like get a feel for what's around the neighborhood and maybe offer things that the other locations aren't are providing something different, something specific that people are going to want to come to this building and partake. But I was just wondering, in terms of the apartments, are you specifying a certain mix of units, a certain size of units? And I haven't read the housing proposal, but did we propose certain, let's say 115 units, is there a proposal for X number of 2 bedrooms, X number of 1 bedrooms, that sort of thing? And should we be providing for that, or will the RFP be providing some guidance for the size of the units and the number of those sizes? Will that be part of the RFP?
Yeah, I'll just quickly jump in, and then Gabrielle, please, if you have more you want to add. But Alan, given the specific, what I understand is that given the specific structure and layout of this building and the way it's currently configured with very small rooms, obviously there would need to be work to, like, they wouldn't remain as they are currently, which most recently was jail cells, but these are not intended to be 2-bedroom or large apartments. That this is much more of a individual, you know, 1-person type unit. But Gabriella, please.
So the recommendations from the community board don't specify. So, but as Jessica said, for the population of the supportive housing, typically they are studios and sometimes 1 bedrooms. That's what's most efficient for that, you know, that population. Other units could be, considered, and I think depending on how the floor plans get laid out, some of them might end up having to be larger because of windows and hallways and things like that. So it's sort of open at this point, but understanding that supportive housing is typically on the smaller side. Supportive is typically studios.
So just so we understand, so you're not contemplating taking walls out in between the rooms? You're using the existing rooms?
No, no, definitely would have to be taking walls out. They are not designed as housing units.
No, I've been in the building many years ago, so remember, that's why I asked.
Yes. Those are not sufficient unit sizes. No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you for your comments.
Is there anyone else, Dave? I see your hand, but is there anyone else from the community who wanted to speak on this topic? And also, Natalie, not to put you on the spot, but I believe you did join us this week. If there's anything from your perspective or the senator's office that you'd want to add, please do.
I don't think so. I just appreciate everyone's feedback, and glad to be here.
Great. We're happy to have you. We're going to go to Maria, and then Dave, since you've already spoken, but we'll come back to you to just wrap it up if there are no other comments. Maria?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Gabriella, will you be at Housing, Health, and Human Services tomorrow?
Will be, yes.
Okay, and I guess Angel also, because I see him nodding. Well, you guys have spoken to CB4 leadership before. So what you're hearing now is going to be pretty much similar, the same thing that you'll be hearing tomorrow. And the thing that resonates with me the most from what I heard tonight is that the specificity would be really important to have. Viren hit on it, and Jessica mostly is who I remember speaking about it the most. So I would concur with what they're saying. Okay. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, Dave, let's close it out, but we'll let you have the last word.
Okay, I would just mention that, we first got interested in preserving Bayview back when the state first considered putting it up for sale after the correctional facility was closed, because we thought that it might be sold into private hands, knocked down, and a high-rise luxury tower would be put there. It kind of sets off alarm bells when I hear market rate and zoning override, and take into account the river views that can be had if you build up tall. And I just want to make sure we don't go down the same road that Novo went down, where the preservation just ended up being facadism of the most historic part of the building with something shooting up through its roof. We don't want to go there. I think that this RFP should call for the actual preservation of that building and not allowing it to be the base for a tower, maybe the annex. And it would really help if we had some massing diagrams to look at, in terms of what would fill out the FAR that we're talking about, what would fill out the existing FAR. And maybe those diagrams could be the basis for a limit on what could be built under the RFP. But I think we absolutely need some limits, and we need something that's going to ensure true preservation of the historic corner building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. This was, I think, a really good and, again, generative conversation. Gabriella, we really appreciate you, the work that you're doing, and both you and Angels and ESD's commitment to hearing from the community on this project while still keeping us moving forward. This committee will be talking about this again next month. So, and it'll be at that opportunity that we'll be, again, concretizing our feedback and writing that, putting that together in a letter that will go to ESD and our other stakeholders to make sure that all of this feedback combined with that of the housing committee and what we hear at the board is delivered to you. So thank you all.
Meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Carrie, back to you for our next agenda item.
Agenda item number 2. This is you may recall, this is an LPC application for a proposed renovation to an existing residential 5-floor multifamily building in the Chelsea Historic District, 458 West 20th Street, including the installation of relocated PTAC grills on the primary facade, repainting of the existing facade brick to match the existing paint, the installation of new light fixtures at the entry, new door hardware, and the removal of some window gates. I definitely want to call out that there's been an addition to this application, which is that the applicants have since widened the scope to include the approval of the legalization of the center window lintel and sill removal that occurred after the building's landmark designation. You may remember at the last meeting where we had that picture that nobody really knew what it was, that had the original photo with 3 windows across, then the sort of mid 80s photo with the bricked up window, and then today. So now the application is asking for legalizing that removal of the center windows, the lintels and sills. I will turn it over to Courtney. Thanks for coming back. We did write a letter that we did not end up moving forward with on full board, because the applicant agreed to come back and hold their LPC presentation until they spoke to us. So thank you for doing that. And we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Carrie. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me back. There was some confusion about the process the night that I a month ago when we discussed this project. That day I had received new information from Landmarks and we really weren't sure what that meant. I'm going to give a brief recap on our proposal that hasn't changed and then give you an update on the new information, which you may already know. But so this proposal for the facade is to reorganize the louvers at the front facade. So you'll see here they're haphazardly scattered around, and you can see the remnants of the middle windows that were once there. Our proposal is to reorganize them so that they're underneath the windows. Here's the existing facade, and here's our proposal for the organization. None of our scope has changed, but we are adding in the scope which we found of the components that are in violation from the designation photo. Our preservationists had an internal meeting and gave us a good list of the items that were that are now in violation in light of us applying here. So those are, and this was from a prior ownership. You can see this is the designation photo here that they're basing these violations off of. One component is that obviously these windows were bricked up to a certain degree at some point at the time of designation. And obviously it's in violation now by having the bricks flush to the rest of the facade. The other component of it is that the lintels and sills have been removed. Furthermore, on the top story, the lintels are now protruding in a different configuration. Sorry, let me just make sure I get all this right. The sills have been painted, which we are proposing to remove the paint from them. We are in the process of getting the spec of what that material actually is. Oh, and then the last item that's in violation, you'll see at the base here, the brownstone material has been now, there's been rustication lines added at some point, and we don't really know when, these lines that you can see here. All of those components that I just listed are in violation. So part of our proposal now will be to legalize those components as well as move or add the PTAC louvers to underneath the windows, use the bricks that we take from there to brick up the old openings, and repaint the facade with assistance of selecting the color from our preservationist team. That is sort of the long and short of it. Not sure what else I can say about it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone? Okay, so, David, I can see you, but I actually think it's probably good to keep the presentation up for a minute because people might have specific questions about specific pages. So, sure. David, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I have a problem with legalizing a former violation. Instead of requiring that those lintels and sills be put back in, I don't think it's good practice for future reference to legalize former violations, even though it was done by a prior owner. Had the current owner done due diligence, they would have found that there was this violation that needed to be remedied. As we said the last time around, I don't think we would ever approve removal of historic fabric under the existing windows to put in through the wall air conditioning units, which, even though it's fairly common in modern buildings. It's a luxury. It's not a requirement. It's not like a code requirement. I walked past the house today, and I'm really amazed that the owner doesn't want to simply install windows in those bricked up window locations up the center of the building. It's like $1 million view across 20th Street. It looks between two buildings, straight across the commons of the seminary, and to some of the most beautiful architecture within the seminary. And looking at the floor plans that were included in the presentation, you know, it would include a minor jog of the separating walls of the rooms on either side to accommodate that. And it would just transform the facade, you know, landmarks, and we would love you if you did that. Have you spoken to the owner about that? I noticed that
Yes,
right now there's a sign out front that says sponsor units for sale. I mean, wouldn't they want to maximize the value of their property?
You know, the ownership was supposed to be here tonight also. They're having the person representing just had a new baby and some other things going on at home. So I apologize on their behalf. They should be here also. I agree with you. It's a nice view across the way. We have discussed it. Certainly with your thoughts, we will continue to discuss it and see how it transpires. I don't disagree with you. I think it all comes down to the layout and the cost.
Right, and we had raised the possibility of installing ductless mini split systems that don't require the through the wall penetrations. You know, the technology is there, so I don't know why we would ever approve this that removes historic brick under the windows and legalizes a violation that should never have been committed in the first place.
If I may just say that this is a new violation. It didn't exist before. And in fact, certainly when I was hired and we did our research, this photo was not available.
Right, but the work that constitutes the violation was performed. That isn't new.
Right.
Yeah, maybe it's unreasonable to expect the buyer to have realized that there was no permit for that work, but you know, it's still a violation, and
Sure.
and you know, you could understand why it's a violation when you look at the base of the building.
Yes.
So if I can just jump in, I want to just summarize that at our last meeting, we had a consensus to recommend denial for some of the reasons that David stated, the removal of more historic brick fabric to create these air conditioning ducts versus a different way. I think that if anybody has a different opinion based on the new information that we got tonight, it would be worthwhile hearing. And if not, we can probably just move to a vote. Bert?
Yeah, I just have a question for the committee. I agree absolutely with just about everything that David said. The question I have is, what authority do we have to legalize what were violations? Even
who are you asking, Bert?
How can we do it? I'm sorry, Carrie, I didn't hear.
I was unclear who you were addressing the question to.
Whoever has the answer. Because I don't have the answer.
I don't have the answer either, Bert.
I mean, just because if we pass, we write a letter and saying, yeah, go ahead and do it, is that legal? Does that absolve people of a violation? I mean, I don't think it does, but, I'm not the lawyer here.
Thanks, Bert. Betty?
Yes, I totally agree with what Bert was saying and others. And the first time I heard oh, well, we're going to legalize these things that were violations. I thought it was like you take a magic wand. I mean, I can't see that at all. And then I also think this building, if you took that column of windows that used to be there and made them windows, it would I just think it would make so much more attractive building and so much more sensible building if you put windows there, not only too, that the people who were going to live in these apartments would have a much more pleasant environment. And I would think that the owner could get higher rent by that, but that's not what we're talking about, to get higher rent. But to have this weird windows that used to be, it just makes no sense whatsoever in my mind. So I think we ought to add that to our letter. Thanks.
Thanks, Betty. Viren?
Yeah, just a sort of quick question of clarification. Let's say, presuming that the applicant goes back and says, okay, fine, we're willing to do the windows, but they're going to still own those PTAC units. And so we really have to be very clear about exactly what we want to recommend they do. So that's one thing that as a committed conversation, I think we should be very, very clear about. And the second part that I'm going to, and that's also a question actually much more for people who know this better than I do, David and Pam, you can probably help me with this. Has LPC ever officially legalized a violation of this nature? Do we have any such case study in mind?
Pamela's hand is raised. So if you're finished, Viren, we'll go to Pamela and she might be able to answer your question.
That's a good question, Viren. LPC has a process by which they can basically cure a violation after the fact. They can erase it. I do not know that they've ever done that with something as egregious as this is, the defacement of this otherwise perfectly splendid townhouse. Aside from the removal of its high front stoop and its graceful parlor floor windows, it's pretty much intact other than that. Also, as far as puncturing openings, air conditioning sleeve openings under the windows and eliminating the existing ones is just so 20th century. Why would they not welcome the newest technology, which is not really that expensive any more than what they're proposing to do now? I don't believe. It's a little mind-boggling why they are insisting on pursuing this. I would also say, as far as painting the brick is concerned, bricks should never be painted. They can't breathe when they get painted and they spall, and it just creates terrible problems for the owners for maintenance purposes. And they're beautiful brick under there. If you look at the house immediately next to it, you see how beautiful those brick are. It's the same brick. Those are my comments. Thank you. Thank you.
If no one has any more comments, Courtney, we appreciate you coming back. I think that this is a difficult one for us.
It's difficult for me too, because
I'm sure
I agree with everything you've all said. I'm not funding the project. I'm the architect.
You're between a rock and a hard place.
You're between a brick and an air conditioning unit. If anyone has a motion.
Yeah.
Move to deny.
Second.
Courtney,
wait, I'm a public
for the
member.
purpose
I'm not
of this,
sure I can move. Can
okay,
I do that?
1 second. For the purpose of this vote, would you mind taking down? Thank you so much. Okay, so maybe we want to do that in reverse order.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Is there a second? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Abstain? Present, not eligible? Thanks for coming back. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate your time. And Viren, Pamela, David, we may be in touch with help with this letter, just to make sure we get it all right.
Carrie, Jesse was shaking his head, so he probably has something to say.
Oh.
No, I was shaking my head at my own ridiculousness. I was voting because I
saw you vote.
so much like you all about this. I'm baffled on how this ended up. I kind of a little baffled by LPC on this one as well. So I just was
really.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention
just really quickly, Pam, you can completely make a motion just so you know. There's no.
Oh, thank you.
Nothing in our bylaws.
I was not sure.
No, you are a member of the committee, 100%.
And I mean, I look at the board of who's here tonight, and I feel like maybe almost everyone knows this, but it would be great, I think, for Jessica and I to have more members testify at LPC. So we may be reaching out to people to do that. I know David does it often for us when we can't do it. So thank you, David.
And I do it.
And Pamela does it as well. But, it's interesting to watch. So it's interesting to hear and to watch, and we can help you prepare the materials to testify. But if anyone's interested, shoot us an email, or we'll shoot you an email just anyway. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks again for your time, everyone.
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Is that it for us?
That's your agenda, unless there's new and old business.
I don't think so. Good news. We're going to see Former Colored School number 4 tomorrow at 1 o'clock with Eric Washington and I forgot. Council member Watcher and Pam, David, myself.
Take photos.
Yeah, we will take photos. Yeah.
And
always.
And show them to us.
Okay.
Especially the roof.
Yeah. There are photos, by the way, Betty, in the inspection report that was in the Dropbox. We can get that to you too. But we'll take more. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Someone make a motion
to adjourn.
You can't. Can you?
It's fine. We'll deal with the consequences at the open meeting committee later.
Okay. Good night, all. Happy holidays.
Well, happy holidays.
Thank you all.
I think we did good tonight.
Yeah.